Hello everyone, and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Luna was Eldwood's heart, and her laughter was a song that could lift even the heaviest spirit. She held herself with gentle grace, her eyes filled with a tenderness that made strangers feel like family. She was 5 months pregnant, her belly a soft curve beneath her cotton gowns, and the hamlet was buzzing with excitement about the child she bore. Finn, her husband, was a craftsman with harsh but compassionate hands who shaped wood into furniture that decorated almost every home in Eldwood. Their love was the kind that people admired, constant, silent, and profound. Electra, however, was different. She was fire where Luna was water, and her presence was sharp and electrifying, attracting stares and conversations everywhere she went. She had arrived in Eldwood 2 years before, a stranger with a history she would never reveal. Her beauty was evident, but it was her unpredictable nature that made her alluring. She and Luna had become close, their friendship a perfect balance of extremes, with Luna's calm soothing Electra's restless spirit. Finn, too, had been lured into their orbit, his quiet strength providing a calming influence on both women. But behind the surface, something darker was simmering. The universe shattered on a clear fall evening. The town square was alive with the harvest celebration, lamps sparkling like fireflies and the air thick with the aroma of cooked apples and cider. Luna, glowing in a delicate blue dress, stood near the bonfire, her palm resting protectively on her stomach. Finn stood nearby, laughing with a group of men, his gaze never moving away from his wife. Electra, on the other hand, was a shadow on the outskirts of the crowd, her stare locked on Luna with an intensity that most others overlooked. No one noticed Electra move away from the firelight, her step silent as she neared Luna. No one heard what they spoke, but others subsequently claimed to see Luna's smile fail and her hand tightening around her tummy. No one, not even Finn, who was only a few steps away, could have imagined what happened next. Electra's hand moved like lightning, a blade gleaming in the firelight as it sank into Luna's stomach. The world seemed to pause, with the festival's music and laughing drowned out by a sudden, deafening quiet. Luna gasped, her eyes wide with shock and pain, grasping the wound as she staggered back. Blood streamed through her fingers, turning the blue fabric of her clothing a terrible red. Electra. Finn's raw and distressed voice cut through the silence as he hurried to Luna's side. He caught her as she collapsed, holding her shaking body. The crowd separated in shock, their expressions a jumble of terror and confusion. Electra stood still, the knife still in her fingers and her expression unreadable. Was there rage? Regret? Or is it something deeper, which no one can name? Luna, stay with me, Finn said, his voice breaking as he pushed his palms against hers, attempting to stop the flow of blood. Luna's breath came in tiny gasps, her eyes searching for his, filled with terror that cut deeper than the blade. Finn's heart sank as he realized that their child was in danger. The village doctor, an old man named Tom, pushed through the gathering and knelt by Luna, his countenance bleak. "Get her to my clinic," he demanded, his hands already moving to examine the wound. Finn carefully took Luna, her weight light in his arms, and carried her through the astonished crowd, his mind a blur of worry and prayer. Electra dropped the knife, and the clatter of metal striking stone broke the silence. She didn't run, speak, or protest as 2 men from the hamlet grabbed her arms, their expressions hardened with wrath. "Why?" one of them demanded, but Electra simply stared at the ground, her lips pushed into a narrow line. Tom worked fast in the clinic, his hands calm despite the haste. The wound was deep and dangerously close to the womb, and Luna's face turned paler with each passing minute. Finn sat next to her, clutching her hand, his voice a quiet murmur of reassurances he wasn't sure he trusted. "You are strong, Luna. You're going to be okay." Luna's eyes flickered, and her grip on his hand loosened. "Finn," she said softly, her voice scarcely audible. "I'm sorry." "Don't," he murmured, his throat tight. Don't dare to apologize. Just hold on. Tom's face was serious as he worked, his palms wet with blood. The baby, he began, but Finn shook his head, unwilling to listen. He couldn't lose both. He would not. Back in the square, the festivities had devolved into anarchy. The people muttered among themselves, piecing together parts of what they'd seen and assumed they knew. Electra was brought to the village hall and kept in a small chamber until the elders decided what to do. She sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, eyes remote. No one understood why she would hurt Luna, her friend and confidant. What motivated her to commit such terrible act? As the night progressed, rumors spread like embers in dry grass. Some claimed Electra was constantly envious of Luna's happiness, her love for Finn, and her upcoming motherhood. Others spoke about a secret, a betrayal that had grown in the shadows. A few people claimed to have observed Electra and Finn talking late at night, their heads bent close and their voices quiet. But no one knew the truth, and Electra provided no answers. Luna clung to life in the clinic, defying the odds. Tom was able to stabilize her, but the danger was far from finished. The wound had resulted in difficulties, and the baby's heartbeat was weak, a fragile thread that may snap at any time. Finn remained at her side, his focus narrowed to the rise and fall of her chest and the faint warmth of her palm in his. Days passed, and Luna remained in a precarious position, torn between life and death. Finn scarcely ate or slept, spending every moment at her bedside. Meanwhile, the village was dealing with the aftermath. Electra was questioned by the elders, but her silence was frustrating. She provided no explanation or defense, only one sentence. "I did what I had to do." The words sent shivers through the town. What exactly had she meant? What may be the justification for such an act? Some asked for her exile, while others advocated for harsher punishment. But Finn, engrossed by his vigil at Luna's side, had little regard for justice. All he wanted was for Luna to open her eyes, smile at him again, and let him know their child was safe. Luna stirred one evening as the sun fell below the horizon, coloring the sky in mournful tones. Finn's heart jumped as her eyes flickered open. "Luna," he said, moving near, his voice full of hope. She tilted her head and met his eyes. "Finn," she whispered quietly, her voice weak but clear. "Is the baby?" Tom, who had been reviewing her chart, stepped forward. "The baby's still with us," he replied, his tone cautious but friendly. "But we are not out of the woods. You should relax, Luna. You must fight." Luna's eyes welled up with tears and she nodded, tightening her grip on Finn. "I will," she said, her voice trembling with resolve. Despite Luna's efforts to recover, the hamlet remained fragmented. Electra's actions had ripped apart the fabric of their community, leaving mistrust and fear in its wake. Some began to shun Finn, their gazes filled with unspoken queries. Did he know something? Had he taken part in it? The rumors about him and Electra spread, encouraged by the lack of explanations. Finn ignored them, focusing entirely on Luna. But late at night, when the clinic was quiet and Luna was asleep, his thoughts turned to Electra. He remembered their late-night discussions and how her laughter felt like a flame in the dark. He'd never crossed a boundary or betrayed Luna, but he couldn't deny Electra's allure, the way her intensity had sparked something in him he didn't want to define. Had that been enough to motivate her to do this? Had she noticed something in him that was not there, or worse, something that was? The questions gnawed at him, but he dismissed them. Luna was his entire universe, and now more than ever, she needed him. Weeks became months, and Luna's condition gradually improved. The baby's heartbeat became stronger, a silent miracle that Tom described as nothing short of a wonder. However, the physical and mental scars lingered. Luna's laughter was scarce now, and her eyes were clouded with an anguish that extended beyond the wound. Finn, too, had changed, his once easy smile replaced with a somber determination. Meanwhile, Electra was gone. The elders had decided to expel her, refusing to retain her in Eldwood after what she'd done. She left without resistance, her stuff packed in a single bag, accompanied by the silence of a hamlet that no longer recognized her. Some stated she had gone to the city, but others claimed she had gone somewhere where no one would ask her name. Finn didn't care where she went, as long as she was gone. But the questions persisted, unaddressed. Why had Electra done this? What drove her to such a desperate act? Luna, in her quiet moments, would occasionally mention Electra, her voice heavy with regret. She was hurting, Luna whispered, placing her palm on her stomach. I saw it in her, but I didn't know how deep it went. Finn wanted to despise Electra and blame her for what she'd done. But he couldn't get rid of the image of her eyes that night, how they carried something broken and lost. He wondered whether she had been trying to destroy something in herself, as well as Luna. As winter fell on Eldwood, Luna gave birth to a daughter, a small, strong girl with her mother's eyes. They named her Hope, which sounded like a prayer. The town rejoiced, their happiness a frail attempt to rebuild what had been broken. However, the scars remained, inscribed on the hearts of all who witnessed that night. Finn and Luna gradually rebuilt their lives, their love providing a quiet strength that carried them through. But the shadow of Electra's act persisted, a reminder of how swiftly trust might be broken and how deeply love could hurt. In the quiet moments, when the river murmured and the pines swung, Finn would glance at Luna and wonder if they'd ever truly be whole again. The night had fallen heavily over the peaceful town, drowning the streets in an almost unnatural calm. Luna sat near the window of her little house, one hand resting on the soft swell of her stomach. She was only 4 months pregnant, but she could already feel the tie of a mother, an innate connection that tugged at her heart every time the child moved inside her. Finn, her companion, had promised to return before dark, but the hours passed, and she began to feel anxious. She attempted to divert herself by running her fingers across the wooden crib Finn had been working on, its edges smooth but unfinished and smelled faintly like pine. Every detail was a promise of a future they were preparing for, one they thought would be safe and bright. But life, in all its terrible unpredictability, had different plans. Electra had been a shadow on the fringes of their tale, a figure neither of them wanted to face yet could never entirely avoid. She had previously been close to Finn, before Luna entered his life and love settled on him like a fresh clarity. Electra had been his confidant, his fire, and his storm. When Finn selected Luna, something inside Electra shattered. She wore her hatred like armor, and as their enjoyment rose, her contempt got stronger. Despite the fact that she had been missing for months, Finn and Luna couldn't escape the notion that she wasn't really gone. Finn returned in the evening with a sense of anxiety. His voice cracked as he told Luna that he had spotted Electra about town. She'd looked at him with burning eyes, words streaming from her lips about betrayal, being forgotten, and broken promises. Luna had tried to console him, reminding him that Electra's grief was hers to bear, and that they had done nothing wrong in choosing love. Finn's heart bled with remorse, though, for he had promised Electra long ago that he would never leave her. Love is rarely as simple as choosing one route over another. It leaves echoes, burdens, and scars that never fully heal. The knock came late the following night. Luna initially assumed it was Finn, who had returned early from work. She stepped gently to the door, palm on her abdomen, and hummed softly to calm herself. When she opened it, Electra stood there with wild eyes and lips twisted into an unnatural smile. The street lamp behind her cast lengthy shadows across her face, giving her the appearance of being hollowed out by sadness and wrath rather than the lady she once was. Before Luna could respond, Electra pushed past her into the room, her steps swift and determined. Luna's voice sounded sweet, yet her heart raced. She questioned why Electra had come and attempted to calm her down with words of peace, but Electra just gazed at her tummy, her hands locked into fists at her sides. She talked about Finn, how he had misled her, and the promises she thought were hers alone. Her voice cracked under the weight of her pain, and Luna saw not only rage but also despair. But despair, when twisted enough, can become dangerous. It happened so quickly that Luna could barely process it. Electra reached into her coat, the metal glinting in the dim light. Then the scorching pain struck as the blade slashed into her stomach. Luna gasped sharply, her body curling reflexively over the life within her. The world spun out of control as she slumped to the floor, her hands furiously pressing against the cut, her blood covering the wooden planks underneath her. Electra's pale, trembling face flickered with something, regret, terror, or perhaps nothing, before she turned and ran into the night. Finn came just a few minutes later, but it felt like an eternity. He'd heard the noise down the street and felt a peculiar pressure in his chest, like if his heart knew something was wrong. When he saw her, slumped and bleeding, he screamed through the silence, primal and guttural. "Electra!" he shouted, his voice breaking under the strain of fury and panic. He knelt alongside Luna, placing his hands against the wound, his tears pouring on her pale face as he implored her to keep on, remain awake, and fight. He cried for aid, and his cry echoed throughout the village, causing people to flee their houses. The hours that followed were a whirl of sirens, hurried footsteps, and frigid hospital lights. Doctors worked furiously, their expressions filled with anxiety, as Finn waited outside the chamber, his hands smeared with blood that was not his own. Every second felt like a lifetime, and every sound from behind closed doors was a dagger of dread. He remembered the cot that remained unfinished at home, the lullabies Luna had spoken when she thought no one could hear, and the vows they had made to their unborn child, that they would protect them and give them the life they deserved. And now it all depended on the delicate thread of existence. When the doctor finally appeared, his face was dismal. Luna was alive but frail, her body suffering. The child's destiny was uncertain, and the wound had come dangerously near to taking both lives. Finn listened, numb, his mind filled with fury and sadness. He wanted to cuddle Luna and tell her that everything would be fine, even though he no longer believed to himself. Inside her hospital room, she appeared pale and fragile, yet when her eyes met his, there was still power and love. She reached for his hand, saying his name, and he collapsed beside her, his head pushed against her chest as he vowed never to let her go. However, love cannot heal all wounds. The days passed into weeks, and despite her best efforts, Luna carried the anguish of what had been taken from her. Even though the infant survived, the night of violence that nearly killed both mother and baby would leave an indelible impression on him. Finn carried guilt like an anchor, condemning himself for Electra's actions, for not protecting Luna, and for failing to see the storm coming sooner. He repeated that night over and over, her cry, his screaming, the way her body crushed in his grasp. It disturbed his sleep, waking him in the middle of the night with tears flowing down his cheeks. Electra was discovered days later, wandering the outskirts of town in a stupor, her hands still trembling as if the act she had committed resided within her like a ghost she couldn't shake. She did not struggle when the cops apprehended her. She did not testify in her defense at the trial. When Finn saw her in the courtroom, her eyes hollow and broken, he felt something he didn't want to admit. Pity. She had damaged herself as much as she had attempted to destroy others. But pity couldn't erase the scars she left behind. Her sentence was lengthy, and she vanished behind bars, her name becoming little more than a whisper in the background of their lives. Luna and Finn continued on, but life was never the same. Their love, while powerful, was tinged with regret, the remembrance of what had been almost lost. When their kid was born months later, healthy but small, they sobbed not only with delight, but also with grief for the anguish that had come before. They named the infant Hope since it was what kept them alive during the darkest hours. Hope became the light that guided them ahead, yet the past never let go fully. Years passed, and the wound developed into a scar. Scars on the body, however, tell stories of suffering, betrayal, and survival. Luna would sometimes sit beside her child's crib, later his bed, and cry, not only for the joy of seeing them grow, but also for the night that nearly took them away. Finn grinned and played, but he often found himself staring into the distance, his mind traveling to Electra, the moment his shout filled the air, and how his world had almost ended. Despite his efforts to forgive himself, the weight never totally lifted. Others forgot about Electra, but for Finn and Luna, she was a ghost at the fringes of their existence, a reminder of how fragile love and life can be. She was the shadow behind their family's light, the storm that almost destroyed them but, in some strange way, taught them the worth of every single breath, heartbeat, and smile from their child. Pain and love were interwoven, since one could not be remembered without the other. Their story was ultimately one of perseverance rather than victory or loss. It was a story told in blood and tears, propelled by the relentless pounding of hearts that refused to stop, even as everything combined to break them. Though pain lingered, and the memory of that night would never fade, love lingered as well. Quiet, steady, unrelenting. It wasn't a happy story, as fairy tales are, but it was genuine, excruciatingly real, and a monument to how humans can overcome even the most horrible twists of fate. Luna endured her scar with quiet grace, Finn bore his guilt with silent strength, and Hope grew up surrounded by a love so strong that it could not be broken, not even by a knife or despair. Their lives continued on the basis of that weak yet unshakable love.